all the shows are talking about how like this is awful for America that Jimmy Kimmel was, indefinitely suspended, and isn't this awful for America? And it's a chilling thing for the First Amendment. And all they're saying that on every platform. Not one person has said anything about me. Not one person on that network has said, they've all gone out of their way to say, isn't this horrible what happened to Jimmy Kimmel? Isn't even including Morning Joe and Mika, who went after me after the show, basically saying they were glad I was terminated. And now today they're talking about how awful it is for our country that somebody like Jimmy Kimmel can't say what he said and he is indefinitely suspended, and not an iota about what their employer just did to another employee.
That was disgraced former MSNBC reporter Matthew Dowd, who was shamefully fired for making the most disgusting Charlie Kirk comments moments after his death, pretty much. And if that moment warmed your heart, what about me? Nobody's talking about how I was fired. If that moment warmed your heart and you love to see some weepy willow, pathetic puss boy like Matthew Dowd crying about how nobody cares that he was fired, well, be sure to stick around for the rest of this video, because I'm going to be sharing about 10 more heartwarming moments that will bring joy to your soul. But it just blows my mind, honestly, that people like Matthew Dowd are confused about how, first of all, nobody's talking about them. I don't understand why he'd be confused about that. You're one liberal parrot reporter out of a flock of dozens of you on television. Of course no one cares that you were fired. And second of all, how are you surprised you were fired? These were his comments.
That we don't know if this was a supporter shooting their gun off in celebration, or so we have no idea about this. But following up what was just said, he's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions. And I think that's the environment we're in, that people just, you can't stop with these sort of awful thoughts you have and then saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
Oh, according to liberal logic, if you don't want to get murdered or assassinated or beat up or killed, then just don't say anything that makes people want to kill you. That's not how free speech works. No wonder this moron was fired from MSNBC. Worst of all, saying this, like I said, literally moments after Charlie Kirk's death. I mean, he just had the gall to say it. And of course, he's gone now. And that leads me to the whole point of this video. Is it good that conservatives are now embracing cancel culture in America? Because of course we now have The Guardian and other news sources releasing tons of articles like this in light of now Jimmy Kimmel being canceled by us. Analysis: for comedians around the world, the laughs often end as democracy fades. Yeah, they want to tout about how democracy is fading now. Of course, they didn't have anything to say similarly like this when Gina Carano was fired from Disney, when Tucker Carlson was fired by Fox, when Roseanne Barr was canceled, or when a whole host of other Republicans and conservatives were canceled, some of them for even smiling. Did we forget so soon about this young college kid even wearing a MAGA hat who just dared to smile at a Native American protester? He didn't even say anything. He didn't say anything racist. He didn't slur. He didn't use slurs. He didn't even speak. He was waiting at a bus stop, I believe, and a Native American protester got up in his face and he smiled. And the news media slandered this guy. So if you go back just a couple of years, conservatives weren't just being canceled by liberals for speaking, they were being canceled by liberals for just smiling. And now they want to complain and they want to cry about how conservatives have flipped the script. Cancel culture now is on the conservative side of the playing field. I myself will proudly identify nowadays as a social justice warrior. I've called multiple places of employment for people that I've seen celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk, and some of them even advocating for further political violence. I'm proud to say that I feel responsible, at least in part, for getting some of these absolute liberal lunatics fired from their jobs, and I hope they wind up eating out of a dumpster and living on the streets for the rest of their days, because that's exactly where they belong. You know, They want to cry about Jimmy Kimmel being canceled, but he was canceled for a whole host of reasons. I think first and foremost, the main reason being that his ratings sucked. Nobody was watching him. He was progressively less and less funny as Trump derangement syndrome progressively started eating away at his mind more and more over the last 10 years. And this was the moment that he was canceled, essentially.
We had some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them and doing everything they can to score political points from it.
Now, he goes on to make fun of how President Donald Trump apparently didn't seem to care about Charlie Kirk's death, which of course we know is not true. We've heard behind the scenes stories when Trump was told and informed about Charlie Kirk's death, he got very quiet and he actually asked everyone in the Oval Office to leave the room. I'm not even going to play that part where he's making fun of Trump for it because it's shameful, but it's also just part of the shtick. There's no reason for him to be canceled for that. However, what he said there in the part that I did play, implying once again that Tyler Robinson, the liberal left radical lunatic Antifa member who killed and assassinated Charlie Kirk, was part of MAGA, is the misinformation that is so dangerous. And I deliberately am using the word misinformation. Why? Because Jimmy Kimmel was flat out lying on the air, but misinformation is the word that the liberals always targeted conservatives with. That was the reason and justification back in the day, especially during 2020 to 2022, where a lot of conservatives faced bans, shadow bans, outright deletion of their accounts, public shaming, cancellations, etc., etc. And so now I'm purposefully and intentionally using that term against them because that's exactly what he was doing. Tyler Robinson, we know for a fact, was radicalized by our own institutionalized education systems, which have been infiltrated and breached by liberals for over 50 years now. He went off to college despite being raised by a Mormon conservative family. His father was part of the sheriff's department. All it took was just a couple years of leaving that family atmosphere and being exposed to liberal brainwashing, not to mention living with a transgender roommate who became his lover boyfriend, according to the text that we have. And that was it. He joined Antifa Discord servers, and he decided that Charlie Kirk was too full of hatred to continue being allowed to live, and he did something about it. Of course, because of his family background, at first, the liberals were all over social media, gaslighting everyone. We MAGA apparently hate conservatives. We hate our own. We're in a giant civil war. We can't stand each other. We just think everyone's full of hate on our side of the aisle, and that we like what. None of it made sense at the time, and it's like it was so obvious what was going on. But of course, there's Jimmy Kimmel trying to maintain that narrative, and falsely so, as all the evidence points to the contrary. This is why he was canceled. You cannot be doing this. He's a late-night comedy talk show host. He shouldn't even be discussing these events on a day-to-day basis like he is, and the only reason that he is because he suffers from TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, and he can't stop talking about it now. He has been consumed by his own hatred, and now he's canceled. And he's canceled just like this clown was over here, Stephen Colbert. Like, let's not forget about this moron either, who once again turned his entire late-night comedy talk show into nothing more than a glorified liberal political talk show with unfunny humor where he continued to spread false liberal narratives and also at times, just like all of the people on liberal mainstream media, including liberal politicians, used harmful and dangerous liberal rhetoric that encourages the violence that we are now seeing in America today. And I'm going to tell you what, I will openly and proudly celebrate the cancellation of both Kimmel, Colbert, and that idiot Matthew Dowd, who no one cares about and never will. No one will remember his name. And you know, it's not just going to end there. This was an incredible moment that I listened to on the Scott Jennings show, where Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, said that they might not even be stopping with the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel. They're going to be investigating other talk shows that have become too political and might be violating network guidelines. Take a listen to this.
Seth Meyers at NBC. Just wondering, do you have comments on those shows, and are they doing what Kimmel did Monday night, and is it even worse on those programs, in your opinion?
Well, look, you can be unfunny. That's fine. And a lot of people are sort of saying that, well, people are punishing Kimmel because they don't like a joke that he told. But, you know, we don't need to rehash it here. But obviously what he said was not a joke. It wasn't presented at all that way. But when you look at these other TV shows, what's interesting is the FCC does have a rule called the equal opportunity rule, which means, for instance, if you're in the run-up to an election, you have one partisan elected official on, you have to give equal time, equal opportunity to the opposing partisan politician. So far, so good. But there's an exception to that rule called the bona fide news exception, which means if you are a bona fide news program, you don't have to abide by the equal opportunity rule. And over the years, the FCC has developed a body of case law on that and has suggested that most of these late night shows, other than SNL, are bona fide news programs. And potentially, I would assume you could make the argument that The View is a bona fide news show. But I'm not so sure about that. And I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs that you have still qualify as bona fide news programs and therefore exempt from the equal opportunity regime that Congress has put in place.
And so now The View is lined up in the crosshairs, and I cannot wait to see the destruction of that show. That is just a bunch of rambling middle-aged women who have no business discussing politics, literally discussing everything from their female emotional perspectives. Their voices are annoying. Their opinions are terrible. They have been sued or threatened with numerous lawsuits in just the last year or two alone, and they're a complete disgrace. And it's not even just the mainstream ones like The View or perhaps Jimmy Fallon or any of these other talk shows that are in the crosshairs. Alternative liberal media has also been targeted. This is a popular moderate streamer, Destiny, right here on the Piers Morgan show. You can see on the panel he's on the far right, the one who's next to Anna Kasparian, and looks like he's got the most severe touch of autism you've ever seen in your life. He is a disgusting subhuman piece of crap human being, and he was exposed. He's been exposed multiple times throughout the years, but this was the final straw, this appearance on Piers Morgan, where he disparaged not only Erica Kirk, the widow now of Charlie Kirk, but also just Charlie Kirk's memory in general, even going so far as to imply that the conservatives deserved it.
If it turns out to have been somebody with a leftist ideology who wanted to shut up Charlie Kirk, would you condemn that?
I won't condemn anything until the president of the United States can go on air and say, all of us need to calm down.
So you won't condemn the murder of Charlie Kirk until Donald Trump says something.
I'm a YouTuber. Leftists and Democrats have been condemning and turning down the temperature, condemning violence, turning down the temperature for a decade. Donald Trump can't go on TV and say, all of us need to calm down.
Right.
Can you tell me why he cannot?
Why would you
his
expect
side
anybody,
to calm down?
Destiny?
You can't answer that. Can you answer that question? Why can't
Can
Trump
you
go
answer
on TV
this
and say,
question?
all of us should be less violent?
Why do you
can't
think
Trump say that?
Why do you
Why
think
is your behavior contingent on Donald Trump?
Insane right now.
Why do you
is
think?
your
No, let me
behavior
ask a
contingent
question.
on Donald Trump?
To answer Anna Kasparian's question to Destiny, why is his behavior contingent on Donald Trump? It's because Trump derangement syndrome is a real mental illness phenomenon that has spread across our country. It's eating away at these people's brains. It's consuming their entire soul, and it dictates all of their actions. On top of that, this narrative, this is something I've been wanting to say for a while now, this narrative that's been spread now by the liberals, very conveniently, mind you, that it is time to turn the temperature down, and that President Donald Trump, of all people, has to be the one responsible to spread that narrative, is a joke. What does it mean when you have liberals who, like Matthew Dowd, say, well, if you say hateful things, hateful actions are bound to happen to you? Combine that with the fact that you have the liberal voter base who openly celebrated in massive droves. I would say well over 50% of the entire Liberal Party openly celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. And amongst that group, I would say a large enough portion, however small, advocated for more violence towards the Conservative Party. And then on top of it, you now have the other liberals saying it's time to turn the temperature down. What this all means is, essentially, don't say anything we don't like and your life won't be at risk. If you say something we don't like, we'll put your life at risk. If we succeed in taking your life, we'll celebrate your death. After we do that, we'll try to blame it on your party, like they tried to say Tyler Robinson was the MAGA shooter. And when all else fails, we'll then say it's time to turn the temperature down, to keep you, the conservatives, docile, while we continue to subtly celebrate the death of you all and even hope for more future deaths of you going forward in the future. That's what's most troubling about this, and that's why conservatives, especially younger generation ones, are refusing to turn the temperature down. Why would we play along with that? You know, in past generations, these old-time conservatives, they all failed to fight back against the liberals. They all made numerous compromises and concessions, and they failed to conserve much of anything. That period of time is over with. And not only that, but now we are playing their game the same way they played it against us. America is not in a violent physical war, but certainly is in an ideological war, and in any war at all, even one that isn't using violence as a tactic to win, like with what we're seeing now, where we are simply using speech and free thought to powerfully convey our points, turnabout is always fair play. It's just the fact that the liberals can't handle that turnabout that's causing them to melt down. After making these disgusting remarks, Destiny would later find out that he's been canceled pretty much across the board and he will never be monetized on platforms now, I believe like Twitch. He'd go on to say in this article, "My entire income is gone now." Destiny claims Elon Musk and other conservatives got him banned from Twitch. And so, yeah, he's crying about it, isn't he? Oh, what a shame. And when it comes to articles, this is the one that I really have been looking forward to going over on this video, because this is a Rolling Stone magazine article from February 20th, 2023. So Biden was still president. And this article was written, "Why Cancel Culture is Good for Democracy." And given the most recent events that we have now witnessed and lived through, I can't believe I'm saying this, I agree with Rolling Stone. They go on to say, "History has shown us that those in power are obsessed with turning any form of accountability into a phenomenon that is intended to bring us into sudden doom." Yeah, it sounds like the liberals, doesn't it? This accountability that's coming their way, now they're claiming democracy is coming to an end. They're back already. Barely over a week after the death of Charlie Kirk, they're back already to using words like fascist and bigots. They just can't help themselves. It's all doom. It's all doom and gloom with the Liberal Party. The following is an excerpt from the upcoming book, The Case for Cancel Culture, How This Democratic Tool Works to Liberate Us All. And I agree. I agree with the title of that book being a statement. Cancel culture being used as a tool now by conservatives to rid and eradicate American culture from far-left liberal scum will absolutely liberate all of us. The article goes on to say, "For many years, cancel culture has been despised or misconstrued as a new phenomenon that's caused havoc on the free expression and speech. We're supposed to now assume that we can't say or do anything without an angry mob instantly judging us and preparing to end our careers before they start. In actual fact, we are the people who make up the so-called mob, and we have control of our own actions." Amen to that. Big amen to that. That is what we are seeing right now. And that is why the liberals, for the first time in at least 50 or so years, are completely on the defensive now, and they don't know how to handle it. We are the mob now. We conservatives, we MAGA, we are the mob that are making our voices heard. And we are using cancel culture not only appropriately, but flat out to our advantage. Cancel culture has leveled the playing field for those who can't always rely on the government to protect them. Another big amen to that. Man, conservatives can really relate to what's being written in this article. Right now, bigots are protected under the First Amendment to fuel disgusting rhetoric without state-sanctioned consequence. The America that tolerated white supremacy in their policies and laws is the same country that wants to remind us how such forms of hate are still legal via free speech. Cancel culture is the poison to those in power that have benefited from unchecked free speech. And now, with the benefit of being 2 years in the future since the time of this article being written, I would say that unchecked free speech is what the liberal mainstream media continues to use against conservatives in the form of violence-encouraging rhetoric like calling us fascists, Hitler, Nazi, evil, all of that. They disparage us. They dehumanize us every chance that they can get so that moments like Charlie Kirk's assassination happen more often. And not only so that they happen more often, but so that when they do, they're celebrated. That's what we've witnessed. And conservatives are now finally awakened to this problem. And the liberal media is panicking that conservatives are awakened to this problem. This is an article that was just written, I believe, today from NBC News. Trump and Republicans find themselves on the other side of the cancel culture wars. J.D. Vance has been one of the administration's loudest champions of free speech and, more recently, one of its loudest voices calling for those disparaging Kirk to be punished. The First Amendment protects a lot of very ugly speech, but if you celebrate Charlie Kirk's death, you should not be protected from being fired for being a disgusting person, Vance said in an interview that aired Wednesday night on Fox News. Yeah, it's always been the liberals who have been there to remind conservatives that freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. Now we finally agree with that. It's just the liberals don't like that we finally agree with it. And again, turnabout is fair play. There's nothing they can do about it. They are now being forced to taste their own medicine, and I smile every time I see them crying about it. Perhaps the best example of liberal hypocrisy combined with the fact that they're now awakened to the reality that conservatives are fighting back using their own tactics came from liberal alternative media speaker Harry Sisson, where he stated yesterday, "We are witnessing the most brazen attack on free speech in modern American history. Elon Trump and MAGA said they were free speech warriors. It's the exact opposite." Of course, the funny thing is, if you go back far enough, as highlighted on this tweet, Harry Sisson was tweeting anniversary tweets. Happy 1-year anniversary of Donald Trump being banned from Twitter. And so he was celebrating that. I mean, and you want to talk about the most egregious attack on free speech? It was banning a sitting U.S. president off of Twitter. That was the most egregious form of free speech violation our country has ever seen. And he celebrated it. Once again, of course, he's on the receiving end of that now, and he knows it. His entire party is doomed, and he's panicking. And he's not the only one panicking. We have seen tweets from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Hillary Clinton and Obama and all of them talking about how democracy is collapsing under this quote-unquote fascist Trump administration, who's now delving into authoritarian rule and attacking free speech outright. But I want to point this out using this video right here. These are the people here trying to now lecture us about how much they love free speech.
We will hold social media platforms accountable for the hate infiltrating their platforms because they have a responsibility to help fight against this threat to our democracy. And if you profit off of hate, if you act as a megaphone for misinformation or cyber warfare, if you don't police your platforms, we are going to hold you accountable.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
But I also think there are Americans who are engaged in this kind of propaganda. And whether they should be civilly or even in some cases criminally charged is something that would be a better deterrent.
So that's them. They love free speech, though. They're devastated now that cancel culture is being used against them and their side. And this attack on free speech by President Donald Trump cannot stand. It's a danger to our democracy. They're all full of shit. And most humorously, I'm going to leave off this video with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez addressing us about how something needs to be done now. Something needs to be done about this media situation here. They just don't know what it is. But before I do that, be sure to subscribe right now to American Advocates for more content like this. Leave a comment down below too. Tell me what your thoughts are on conservatives embracing cancel culture and essentially becoming social justice warriors. Are you delighted to see us finally use their own weapons against them, or do you think we're just stooping too far down to their level and that we should stay more upright and righteous? Let me know what you think. Give the video a like. Thanks for watching, and let's go out with a laugh here of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez absolutely panicking over this situation.
You know, I do think that several members of Congress in some of my discussions have brought up media literacy because that is a part of what happened here. And we're going to have to figure out how we rein in our media environment so that you can't just spew disinformation and misinformation. It's one thing to have differing opinions, but it's another thing entirely to just say things that are false. And so that's something that we're looking into.